Good morning, RosterWatch Nation. It's your friendly neighborhood trash man. Here to talk about fantasy football, things that have happened over the past 24 hours and things that haven't and why they haven't. Thanks for joining me this morning. It's a windy day in Austin, Texas. Things are changing, though, in our weather and in the fantasy football landscape. One thing that is not changing, at least for the Minnesota Vikings, is that it looks like they're out on Aaron Rodgers as their crossover QB to J.J. McCarthy. NFL Network's Tom Pelissero reports the Vikings have rejected trade calls for J.J. McCarthy. He's entering the season as the offseason as the Vikings' number one. And while it's expected that the Vikings will add a veteran quarterback to help ease the transition to J.J. McCarthy, it's unlikely that will be Aaron Rodgers. The Vikings are out on him. At least they allegedly. They said they're not pursuing him. Why do you think that is? Do you think that the devastation and shame that Aaron Rodgers has brought the Vikings over the years has outweighed their need for a veteran quarterback? Is it just something that they will not do, a bridge too far for the Vikings to bring Aaron Rodgers, put him in the purple and gold, have Prince roll over in his Paisley grave? Rest in peace, Prince. Is it just too much for the Vikings to have Aaron Rodgers in their uniform? Do they just not want to pay him as much as he wants? Or, as Harry Snowman just asked, or do they have that much confidence in JJ? Well, it could be kind of the opposite of what's happening in Indianapolis. Maybe they want to see what JJ McCarthy can do. Understand? Maybe they want to know if he is their guy right now. It would be a smart move. It's something that the Colts should have done instead of bringing in a kind of another middling veteran quarterback to compete while their alleged face of their team gets another season in which he doesn't get the reins for an entire season, and they might not know if he's the guy as far as Richardson goes. Terminal sarcasm. With the sarcasm, I'd say it's apt, saying no shame, they took Favre. That's true. And Favre hurt them a lot more than Rodgers did, and did it in a lot more devastating fashion. Adds, maybe they told Rodgers he is guaranteed the starting job. If JJ wins out, he starts. Maybe he isn't, he adds. He corrected himself. So maybe he isn't guaranteed the starting job. If JJ wins out, he starts. Rodgers' ego couldn't take that. That could be the case. Maybe they said that if they signed him, that he'd have to compete with McCarthy for the starting job. And it'd be hard for him to imagine himself sitting on the bench behind a young buck like McCarthy. That could be true. In any case, looks like it's just back down to the Giants and the Steelers for Rodgers' services as of right now. For fantasy purposes, I would, if I had to choose, if I was looking at the fantasy benefit of both receiving cores tied to Rodgers' arm, I suppose I'd want to go to the Giants. I mean, Malik Neighbors doesn't need a lot of help, to be honest. You could probably put me under center there, and Malik Neighbors would have a pretty good year. I think it probably takes less of an accurate quarterback to make that Giants machine run than it would the Steelers. When you have DK Metcalf and George Pickens on the outside there, you're going to need somebody with an arm and somebody with accuracy, consistency, things that Aaron Rodgers doesn't necessarily have right now. Applied literature says maybe they reunite with Kirk so he can coddle another youngin like he did Penix. Freudian slip. Yeah, to coddle Penix. Yeah, I see what you did there, applied literature. Yeah, I mean, it would make sense to bring Kirk Cousins there, have the rich stay richer. Cousins being extremely rich for being a middling quarterback. What a hoodwink. More power to him, He's managed to stay relevant in football for years without really being a quarterback of, I won't say much skill, but he's not one of the best quarterbacks in the league and never really has been. But he's got a mountain of money to sit on. So not too bad for Cousins. But yeah, I could see Cousins going to the Vikings. I think he'd be okay with being a transitory quarterback there, more so than Rodgers would be. Yeah, so Rodgers to the Giants for me, I think that makes the most sense for all parties involved. We'll see what happens, though. But it does go to show that the Vikings have a lot of respect and a lot of hope in J.J. McCarthy. And they think he probably is their guy. We'll see. But it looks like the kid has a good head on his shoulders. He reminds me a little bit of Drake May. At least in the early goings. Speaking of quarterbacks and teams being happy with their quarterback situations, the Steelers are reportedly comfortable starting quarterback Mason Rudolph in 2025. Which sounds a little bit insane to me. But the Steelers did sign Rudolph to a 2-year contract worth $8 million. In 2023, when Rudolph started 13 games for the Steelers, his record was 8-4-1. Not so bad. I mean, I don't know that they won because of Rudolph so much as in spite of him. He's a game manager at best. targeted the hell out of George Pickens. In his entire career with the Steelers, he's thrown for 4,615 yards, 28 touchdowns, and 20 interceptions in 29 games. More touchdowns than interceptions, so that's a good mark. Last season with the Titans, Rudolph was barely passable. For fantasy purposes, DK Metcalf's value goes out the roof. I mean, no, goes out the roof, goes through the floor. Falls from the ceiling, through the roof, down to, I don't know, to the first floor if we're in a 3-story building. It doesn't sap all of his fantasy value, but it definitely isn't an increase. If he thought he was going to do better leaving the Seahawks with Rudolph under center in Pittsburgh, that ain't it. But the Steelers say they're happy with Rudolph. They're comfortable with him as a starter. I mean, of course they're going to say that. They wouldn't say that about a guy who could potentially be their starter this early in the offseason. I mean, that just wouldn't be the smart thing to do as an organization. But it makes what would be a scintillating receiver duo in Pickens and Metcalf pretty pedestrian from a fantasy perspective. So hopefully that's not it for the Steelers. Hopefully that's not the last move they make at the quarterback position this offseason. Moving on, the Titans would like to move on from quarterback Will Levis, according to NFL insider Josina Anderson. Only 2 years ago, Levis was a second-round pick for the Titans. Ended up getting benched for the aforementioned Mason Rudolph last season. Threw 12 interceptions and lost 6 fumbles. It almost seemed like every week we were just kind of waiting to see when Levis was going to fumble. With the number 1 pick in the draft now, well, maybe it was all part of their grand scheme. It seems likely that they'll take Cam Ward or Shedeur Sanders as the future face of their organization, or at least their future quarterback. It seems like Levis's days aren't long for Tennessee. And why should they be? It seems like they know what they have in Levis. They know what they don't have in Levis, unlike some other teams who keep fooling around with their young quarterbacks. You know, that's what you do as an organization. You have a young quarterback that you have some faith in to start with. You let him flounder a little bit. You let him see what he can do. You let him dig his grave and see if he can get out of it. Because then you know when it's time to move on, and you don't spend another season fooling around, seeing if he's the guy, like some teams. There was a signing yesterday. It wasn't all just hyperbole and gossip. Oh, okay. Apply literature. What do we even do with Levis now? Feels like he can't be dropped until after the draft. Uh, that's probably true. Unless, unless, unless you draft really early, right after the draft. But it seems likely, like I said, that Ward or Sanders will be taken by the Titans number one. What do you do with Levis now? You throw him to the Wolves. Or, you wait and see if he lands with another team. Maybe he goes to Minnesota somehow. I mean, there is a sequence of events that could bring him there to make him a bridge for JJ McCarthy. You're probably not going to have to pay as much for him. I mean, you won't have to pay as much for him as you would for a Cousins or a Rodgers. And perhaps they're doing close to the same job, although that might be a stretch. I mean, I guess the only way you don't get rid of Levis on your squad is if he does go to Minnesota somehow. I mean, what's another team that perhaps he could go to and find his way under center week one? Maybe like the Raiders. I mean, does he compete with a Russell Wilson or Aaron Rodgers somewhere? It's not out of the realm of possibilities, but I don't really see it. But I digress. As I said, there was a signing yesterday. Aaron Rodgers' former team, former sweethearts, the Packers signed wide receiver Mecole Hardman, formerly of the Chiefs. Hardman we talked about some yesterday. At length, really. Hardman, who's been the deep ball specialist. Three Super Bowl rings. Really, what does he have to prove? Lands on a Packers team that has a lot of wide receiver talent, but has a lot of wide receiver talent that gets hurt often, namely Christian Watson, who I think maybe Hardman would be the direct replacement for. Field stretcher. Maybe it's that Watson insurance. He's not dissimilar from Jaden Reed either. And maybe if Jaden Reed falls to injury at some point, you plug Hardman in. He's a plug and play guy. So it's not a bad move in that respect. He's not going to expect to play all the time. He never really has. So I think it's a good move. I think he's a good fill-in role player whenever one of their marquee receivers goes down to injury, which seems like it will be inevitable at some point in the season. So not a bad move for the Packers. And as far as fantasy goes, I think, he'll be a garbage grab special. I mean, we're not drafting him. You're not drafting him, are you? He's going to be a guy that if an injury to one of the wide receivers does happen at some point in the season that you could plug and play in daily tournaments or in your redraft if you got a deep enough league. But we're not mentioning Hardman's name again, really, unless somebody gets hurt. He'll probably return kicks. Free agent wide receiver Rondell Moore visited with the Jets on Tuesday. That wouldn't be a terrible move for the Jets. Somebody to play over the center, kind of as a safety valve for Fields. I mean, really, you just got Stone Smart there at tight end. How much are you relying on him as your over the middle pass catcher? I think more to the Jets would make sense. We'll see what happens there. Moore's only 25. Not even 25. We'll be 25 when the season starts. Didn't play last season. Got hurt in training camp. Whoever he signs with, it's probably going to be a prove-it deal. But I think it doesn't make sense for him to go to the Jets. Somebody who's not going to the Jets, as the Panthers re-signed him, is David Moore, 1-year contract. Moore had the best season of his career in 2024. 351 yards, 3 touchdowns. Moore's entering his age 30 season. He's up there. I didn't realize he was that old. The Panthers are looking kind of geriatric in that receiver room. Well, I guess not geriatric. I mean, it's just, it's all or none there. When we have Adam Thielen and David Moore, old men, opposite the young Xavier Legette and Jalen Coker. This bodes well for Coker for me. I loved that kid at Shrine Bowl practices last year. He was one of my favorite receivers, and one of my favorite receivers on tape too. We saw flashes of him this past season. So expect more from Jalen Coker. I mean, if his quarterback can get him the ball consistently. I mean, that's the big question for all of these guys. But Coker's one to look out for. He's one to watch. You heard it from me. Terminal Scream says, is Atlanta playing 3D chess with NFL? Maybe. I love chess. Does anybody else out there play chess? I play chess almost every night. Laying in bed, waiting for sleep to come. That $10 million signing bonus says they want to hold Cousins. And they said that maybe the play is that in doing so, they know the team left without a quarterback is going to pay up or massively overpay, as Terminal Sarcasm said. That's a shrewd move. That would be a shrewd move by Atlanta. Hold on to Cousins, make somebody pay up for him. Like the Seahawks did for Cooper Kupp. Although Kupp and Cousins are different animals. Entirely. The Falcons are getting calls for him. Josina Anderson reports that a third-round pick could be part of the potential return for Cousins. Cousins is 36, heading to the second season of a 4-year, $180 million contract and locked into $10 million in guarantees, as Terminal Sarcasm said, by staying on Atlanta's roster at the start of the new league year. You know, it makes sense for the Falcons to keep Cousins there to help teach, to help coddle Penix, as Applied Literature said. Terminal Sarcasm. I love chess, playing an attorney in a few weeks. Wow. Playing tournaments. I haven't done that with chess. I've done it with poker. I've done it with Texas Hold'em. Never with chess, though. If you don't play chess, you should start. Helps to keep you sharp. At least I think so. It's a beautiful game, much like the game of football. Anything else happened yesterday? Not really. We did find out that the Bears were another option for Kareem Hunt before he re-signed with the Chiefs, which means the Bears may not be content with DeAndre Swift as their primary back in Chicago. I mean, really, it is just him and Roschon, Travis Homer. It's not an improvement on last year. Maybe the Bears do take Austin Johnty. With their first pick. I mean, now knowing that they were in the hunt for Kareem Hunt, maybe they do take Austin Johnty with their first pick. You know, I think it probably hurts Swift more than it does a Roschon Johnson. You know, Johnty's more in the mold of a Swift. I mean, it would hurt as a Cowboys fan, you know, in hopes that he drops to them for their first pick. Give me some hope for them at running back this season. Although Miles Sanders and Javonte Williams, they aren't nothing. They're not nothing in the Dallas backfield, but they're nothing to write home about, nothing to get excited about. But yeah, Genty to the Bears or to the Cowboys. I don't think he falls past them. Terminal Sarcasm. Bear wishing Vegas skips on Genty. I think that they probably will. Vegas very well could take Genty with their pick. Oh, but it just seems like that would be a team that might squander his youth, at least in the state they are in now. You have to think with Pete Carroll there, they'll run the ball a lot. I just don't know that they have the infrastructure to make anything happen for him or to keep him safe. I don't like him to the Raiders. At least not like I do to the Bears, who have improved their O-line in this offseason, and the Cowboys, who already have a decent one. Applied Literature says, why didn't we pick up Dobbins instead of Sanders? Yeah. I'm asking the same question. Jerry likes shiny things. He likes fast, seemingly fast runners, explosive guys, which Dobbins is. Maybe they were scared off by the ACL or the Achilles injury 2 years ago. But yeah, I would have liked Dobbins to the Cowboys more than Sanders for sure, or than Williams for that matter. Maybe they saw him as kind of redundant to Williams. If you squint, they kind of resemble each other. But yeah, that's a move that they should have made. And so, per usual, I'm ending things talking about my beloved but oft-maligned Cowboys. A fitting end to the show, I would say. Anyways, this has been the Trash Man on behalf of RosterWatch.com. Hang out. Enjoy your day. Wait for Alex and Cody to come on and butt heads, rub heads, start a fire. Until next time, be ready.
This is Anthony Richardson, and you're listening to Roster Watch.
This is AJ Brown, and you're listening to Roster Watch.
This is Josh Allen, and you're listening to Roster Watch.